Welcome. My name is Emily Gabriel. I'm officiating today's service. On behalf of Nancy and the family, I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to thank the staff at Renaissance Funeral Home for their caring service during this time. As we prepare to honor the life of Charles Atwell over the next roughly 40 minutes, please kindly relax, be present with those you love, and we'll begin momentarily. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all of the mysteries and all of the knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 through 2. Family and friends, today we honor the life of Charles Edward Atwell Jr., and we do so with deep love. I think it's fair to say that in this service today we will speak with the tongues of mortals. We will not understand all of the mysteries, but I suppose we can get lucky. And although some of our faith may be great, moving mountains is not listed in this afternoon's program. And this is okay. This is all right. You see, as the passage points out, we could speak with the tongues of angels and reveal all of the collective wisdom in this chapel and online. But if we did not have love with us, compelling us, we would be offering nothing. And well, Charlie was certainly something. So as we express our love for Charlie, we also celebrate the love that he offered to others, to you, over his lifetime. Even if Charlie was a stranger to you, we are surrounded by, filled with, and connected, each one of us, by divine love that meets us exactly where we are today. So today, let it be said that Charlie is honored with great love. We need love and all that comes with it today because while we find ourselves in unfamiliar circumstances, we can lean on the familiarity of how it feels to be seen, to be known, and to be close with those we care for. We know that such a force can find us wherever we are and can close any distance. So thank you for being a part of this and for your support and all that you've shared with Nancy and Charlie's family during this time. Know that your presence is deeply felt and truly appreciated. So thank you for sharing the sacred time of remembering and celebrating. We will do our best to honor Charlie together in this chapel and wherever you may be. We will do it authentically, and we will do it with love. Let us pray. Creator of all, you know our hearts. As we come together in gratitude for the life of your son, Charlie, let each word of this service be blessed. We ask that you cover each family and friend sharing in this service. each internet provider, and those who knew Charlie but could not be here, as well as the soldiers performing military honors, with your abundant blessings. As we are those still walking in the mystery of this life, may it serve to soften our hearts. May the process of navigating our path fill us with grace, gentleness, and forgiveness for our fellow travelers. As our brother Charlie now enjoys the resolution of these mysteries in the unity of heaven, may his love continue to be present with us, and may we be comforted in such company. We pray all this in the holy names of God. Amen. At this time, I'd like to welcome Nancy to share a very special eulogy. Nancy not only speaks from the heart about her husband, but also incorporates the wonderful memories that you've offered about Charlie and who he was to you.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this celebration of Charlie's life. The service is not exactly what I had in mind when Charlie first passed away, but unfortunately the coronavirus had other ideas. I'm sure that Charlie would have loved to get his friends together so that we could talk about all the memories we have of him, the good, the bad, and the crazy. But Charlie would never have wanted for his friends to have to choose between their health and attending his service. So it is what it is, and we will celebrate in the spirit of the pandemic, in spite of the pandemic, I should say. Please forgive me for reading this eulogy. It's been a minute since I've done any public speaking, and this would be difficult under any circumstances. Before I begin, I want to thank you for sending your memories of Charlie. He would be so appreciative and humbled by your kind words. I had to do a little editing to stay within the time limits of the service, but hopefully I caught the essence of your sentiments. Anyone who knows Charlie knows that he never wanted to be the center of attention and never bragged about himself. So I suspect that he would not have been happy with me for doing just that today. But he did have a blessed life in so many ways that I think he would want to share with you. So I'd like to start by letting Charlie describe his life and his cardiac history in his own words that he provided in a Duke Visitor publication. I was born in Annapolis, Maryland. This is a quote. I was born in Annapolis, Maryland, and lived in Maryland until 1995. After completing high school, I spent 4 years in the Air Force as a dental assistant before going to work for IBM in administration for 23 and a half years. I have 2 daughters and 7 grandchildren that live in the Washington metropolitan area. I had a heart attack when I was 33 years old while out jogging. After the heart attack, I had several angiograms and angioplasties done prior to my first bypass surgery at age 39. I then had a second bypass operation when I was 44. I am just a guy who has had more cardiac-related issues than most, who lost his mother at the age of 57 from cardiac disease, but whose dad passed at 93 with just 1 bypass surgery. End quote. Charlie had his last bypass surgery when he was 62. He always told me that he thought that someone was watching over him, but during that surgery, there was no doubt. Before we knew that a bypass was needed, a friend suggested a doctor who we found out was known at Duke as the boy genius. The next day we found out that this doctor was available to do the surgery and that one of the surgical team members was a personal friend from our church. That friend, Marlene, prayed over Charlie before and during the surgery and helped ensure that there was no infection as he had experienced in his 2 previous surgeries. The doctor asked for x-rays from Charlie's previous operations at Washington Hospital Center, but the x-rays were taken so long ago that they were on some type of microfiche. He called and decided to give up because he could not find anyone to help. The day before the surgery, I decided to give it a try. I called the hospital and asked them to check again. A minute later, the x-ray manager got back on the phone and said, "You're not going to believe this, but our mail was just delivered, and Charlie's x-rays were among them, end quote. The films were forwarded to Duke, and because of this, the doctor proceeded with a different surgery that opened up an area of Charlie's heart that had been closed for 17 years. He had been on a nitroglycerin patch for all of that time, but after the surgery, Charlie never had to use nitroglycerin again. Finally, 2 days after his surgery, Charlie's heart went into AFib, causing it to work at top capacity. He was sent to Duke Cardiac Intensive Care and was told that his physicians would be up to see him within an hour. At the end of 3 hours, Charlie's heart stopped beating for 7 seconds, and that's not a good thing. His nurse, who happened to be named Angel, could I make this up, came running so that they could use the paddles to get his heart restarted. However, the heart corrected itself just as a team of Duke physicians showed up late, but right on time, to check him out. Someone was definitely watching over Charlie that day. Charlie loved his family, his mother Dot and his dad Eddie, as well as his 4 younger siblings, Robbie, Tommy, Jimmy, and Elaine. While we didn't get together as often as we wanted to, or he would wanted to due to distance, when the family did get together, you could feel the love and respect that they had for one another. Charlie always said that he had a wonderful childhood. Robbie shared some remembrances of his big brother. Quote, "I have known Charlie from all my life. He taught me many things as we grew up together. For example, he taught me how to drive a stick shift car. He taught me how to shine black leather shoes using a cotton ball, water, and a little rubbing alcohol." A humorous story, Dad had finally finished our basement that included a bedroom for Charlie and me. We were teenagers who thought smoking was cool. I took a cigarette from Mom's pack, took it to our room, opened the window, lit it, and started smoking. Little did we know that the window to Mom and Dad's bedroom was opened also. After our parents got a whiff of the smoke, guess who got the Atwell upbringing? Charlie was a caring, reverent, loving, kind soul. He would like everyone to get along with one another. He is up in heaven looking down on us. Charlie was the best big brother anyone could have. End quote. My memory of a Charleston Beach trip we took years ago said a lot about the sibling dynamics. Charlie had decided that he wanted to share his doo-wop music with his brothers and sister. With all respect for him and his efforts to educate them on his music, they all sat in the living room while Charlie explained how great doo-wop was and why. Within 15 minutes of playing his CDs, he looked around and all of his siblings and their spouses were sound asleep. We laughed and decided that doo-wop was just not their thing. His brother Tommy was not on that trip. Unfortunately, he passed away shortly before his big brother. I know that they had a great reunion with their parents when Charlie arrived. Charlie always lit up when he talked about his 2 daughters, Robin and Celeste. He really loved them and missed them when we moved to Raleigh. In fact, his relationship with the girls was one of the things that first attracted me to Charlie. My father was missing for a good part of my childhood, so I really appreciated Charlie's care and concern for his kids. And having 2 wonderful stepdaughters was an extra benefit. And then they gave us, between them, 7 amazing grandchildren. Unfortunately, we lost one of them, Heather, way too early. Hopefully, Charlie and Heather are sharing memories in heaven. Finally, we were blessed with 6 great-grandchildren who are enjoying all the love and happiness of a big family. While we have been unable to travel up to West Virginia or Maryland, where his daughters live, due to Charlie's health struggles, we are so proud of all the children. For an only child like me, I could not have asked for more. Charlie and I met at IBM 34 years ago. We had spoken on the phone about his employees since at the time I was the compensation manager at IBM. When I later met him on the racquetball court, I knew he was someone very special. Early on, he told me about his most memorable time at IBM. Before we met, a disgruntled IBM employee drove his car into the building Charlie worked in. The ex-employee proceeded to shoot anyone in his way. Fortunately, Charlie was in a class off-site that day, but if he had been there, he knew that he would have been killed or wounded because of his location in the building. Since it was a Memorial Day weekend, Charlie and his team spent that time cleaning the entire building so that there would be no reminders of the shooting event. But 2 people were killed and more were wounded, so it was doubtful that anyone could forget. His boss during that time was a man named Jim Gledhill, who Charlie came to think of as a second father. Hi, Jim. Jim wrote the following about Charlie for this service. There really aren't enough attributes in this English language to convey my respect for Charlie. A few come to mind. Unbelievable common sense, fantastic personality, great sense of humor, calm, cool, and collected, excellent problem solver. Exercising initiative is Charlie's middle name. The list goes on, but I'm limited to 500 words. This is a good thing since it would be easy to generate 5,000 or more. One last item, and most important of all, where Charlie is located right now, we can be certain he has been assigned a position having a high level of responsibility. Why? Because Charlie can handle it. Needless to say, Charlie received a fantastic welcome home accolade from the boss when he arrived there. Over our time at IBM, we met a number of amazing people who have turned into lifelong friends. One of those friends is Bonnie, who we have known for close to 40 years. Bonnie shared the following memory. While working at the Rockville IBM office, I heard a voice down the hall on the phone giving someone what for. I later learned that this someone was Charlie, Nancy's new squeeze. At the time, she was concerned that Charlie would have a problem with her having multiple cats. Fast forward to North Carolina, I understand that a cat named Romeo never left Charlie's side throughout an illness. Later, I saw Charlie find and kiss each cat before he would leave the house. I guess I didn't need to worry after all. Bonnie introduced us to Robert, another ex-IBMer, back in 2006. The 4 of us spent a lot of time together over the years. Robert sent the following tribute for today. Quote, "My memories of Charlie are of a soft-spoken, thoughtful guy with a wonderfully infectious chortle of a laugh. I will always remember that laugh from our shared meals together and outings to places like the Carnivore Preservation Trust, the Hillsborough Hog Day Festival, and the Raleigh Art Museum." Another friend from IBM tells of the time I sent Charlie on a date with her. Here is her Charlie story. Quote, "Before we retired, Nancy and I worked together and became friends. I told her about my husband and daughter, and she spoke of Charlie often. I felt like I knew him, even though we had never met. Of course, Nancy and I both had family pictures in the office, so I knew what he looked like. One day, I managed to get 2 tickets to see one of my favorite rock groups at the PNC Arena. I was so excited, but could not find anyone who liked the band enough to go with me. Even my husband, who will usually listen to music he doesn't care for, refused to go with me. Of course, I told Nancy how disappointed I was to have to go alone, but I wasn't about to miss the concert. She said that she didn't like this band either, but Charlie did, and she would ask him if he wanted to go. When she said he would go with me, I was thrilled, but all of our friends and coworkers thought that Nancy and I were out of our minds to let our spouses spend an evening without us. In truth, I think both Nancy and my husband were relieved that they didn't have to go. This was one of the best concerts I ever attended. We had great seats, the band was amazing, they played all my favorite songs, and it was such fun having Charlie there to enjoy it with me. This is a memory I will keep forever." End quote. After Charlie's 2 surgeries, he got a lot of support from a group called Mended Hearts. These volunteers meet with patients after surgery to explain how to take care of themselves and to answer any heart-related, non-medical questions. Having had 2 surgeries before, Charlie was familiar with the group, but was concerned that most of the visitors were much older than him. He felt that he could not relate to someone who had already lived a good portion of their lives before having heart issues. So that is when Charlie decided to start his own support groups. He joined Mended Hearts as an advocate for younger cardiac patients. Ultimately, he became the leader of the Washington, D.C. chapter of Mended Hearts. Charlie was a big advocate for cardiac support groups from then on. He started his first in Maryland over 30 years ago, and from what we have heard, it is still going strong after Charlie and I moved south. In North Carolina, Charlie soon joined the Duke Visitor Program, which was very similar to Mended Hearts, but it was just for Duke patients. About that time, Charlie also joined the Duke Center for Living, where he exercised religiously over the years. I got a note from Maria when she heard of Charlie's death with the following memories. Quote, I knew Charlie the entire time I worked at Duke Health and Fitness Center, 18 to 19 years, and we had a real friendship. I started out as a lifestyle counselor and thoroughly enjoyed giving him a hard time about controlling his blood glucose. I think I need some water. Blood glucose. That evolved into many conversations where we shared views on religion, his, not mine, politics, we were on the same side, family, we all have crosses to bear, and hummingbirds, mine always showed up earlier than his. Charlie was a funny, warm, and sincere person, and it always brightened my day when I talked with him. Even as he faced numerous medical concerns, he always tried to do all he could to improve his situation. He had times when he wasn't doing it all, but then he was honest about it and tried even harder. I know how important his religion became to him, and I hope that it brought him great comfort near the end. All in all, my life was made richer by knowing Charlie. I'm sorry, I have to take a swig. All right. Through most of his time at the Center for Living, Charlie was involved with its cardiac support group. Between exercising and participating in the group, he developed so many friends that supported him until the day he died. One of those friends, Gray, sent this tribute to him. Quote, Charlie was a special guy with a kind heart. When I joined the cardiac support group, I was the only female and a bit younger than the guys. Those guys had been together for years. Sometimes I would feel overwhelmed or lost at a meeting. All I had to do was look at Charlie and he would either wink or smile, and I no longer felt alone. He was like a brother to me, end quote. Another friend from the Duke Center for Living, Sandy, shared the following thoughts. Quote, friendship with Charlie that emerged from that group is a bond that I will cherish forever. Our community of healing hearts will not be the same without him. As many of you know, Charlie and I became born-again Christians later in life. I had been raised Catholic while he had been an Episcopalian. Unfortunately, we had both drifted away from those religions and had not been churchgoers for quite a while. But I believe that we were both seeking more in our life. Then we moved to Raleigh, where we met the most wonderful Christian neighbors, Tom and Joanne. They lived their faith every day and made us want to grow in ours. So we accepted their offer to join them at church, and the rest is history. North Point Church was a small but growing Christ-based congregation that provided the Bible studies that helped us grow in our faith. With God's grace and the role that Tom, Joanne, and so many members of North Point played, we accepted Christ and were baptized a few years after we joined the church. Joanne and Tom wrote this tribute to Charlie for the service. Quote, Charlie was a man who, in our eyes, never met a stranger. He welcomed us right into his world when we arrived on Calverton Drive and happily shared his social, political, and musical thoughts with us. He was a great listener, always without judgment, and could add a side dose of much-needed laughs. He took an interest in our kids and then our grands and had a great sense of humor, fairness, and kindness. We enjoyed many meals together as he and Nancy helped us to celebrate our many family milestones and holidays. Despite health issues, Charlie was a fighter, and we were always happy to see him rally back after each illness. Unfortunately, time has a way of stealing opportunities we now look back on, and we are sad that a very dear and important part of our neighborhood is gone. But he is in a much better place, to which Tom and I think we can all attest. He is now resting with Jesus, healthy and whole, maybe listening to a little bit of Neil Young for good measure. We love you, Charlie, and we're thankful for your friendship and life example, end quote. Other neighbors, Kristen and Sharif, shared their memories of Charlie. They wrote, quote, shortly after we moved across the street, when we first met Charlie, we talked at length about our Christian faith. When he was still feeling well, he invited us to have dinner with him and Nancy one night. This is one regret that we wish we could have followed up on. It would have been very meaningful, and we would have benefited much from speaking with him about his faith. We also recall Charlie as being very grateful and humble. Though he was limited in many things that he could do, we never heard him complain. He considered it a great grace of God for him to be alive, end quote. Around the time of Charlie's last bypass operations, we found ourselves at a new church in Durham, introduced to us by one of Charlie's Center for Living friends, Lauren. We tried not to like it since it was farther than we wanted to travel, but after several visits to the church, we were hooked and we joined the church soon after. We loved everything about New Horizon Church, its music, its sermons, its outreach program, and the many wonderful people we met there. We even signed up to coordinate weekly meals for the Durham Rescue Mission. We attended a number of small Bible study groups and made a lot of very good friends like Mike and Georgina. They wrote the following, quote, "Charlie was very special to us. We have great memories of you both in our home. We used to meet for our small group. He made our lives richer. We always enjoyed his stories and we were recipients of his love and kindness." End quote. As you can tell from some of the earlier stories, Charlie always felt that someone was watching over him. There were just too many coincidences. There was a time that Charlie fainted and fell on a knife he was using to cut up an orange. Fortunately fell on the non-sharp end, but still had bruises all over his stomach for weeks. The doctors were amazed at the fact that none of his internal organs were injured during this accident. Then there was a time Charlie fell on one of the gym's heavy-duty exercise equipment at the Center for Living. By the time I got to the hospital, I found Charlie in a hospital bed that was covered with blood. The doctors thought he had fractured his skull, so they sewed up the wound to see if it would fix itself without surgery, and it did. I could go on, but I think you see why Charlie felt blessed. 2 years prior to his death, Charlie developed an infection that led to pneumonia and ended in sepsis. Many people die from sepsis as it affects all your organs, similar to what seems to be happening with the coronavirus. Charlie lost over 30 pounds and was unable to walk or do much of anything by himself. I truly thought he would not make it through. But after 6 weeks of rehab, Charlie was back home and on the mend. I will finish this eulogy by giving my thoughts on Charlie, even though many of you have captured his many qualities in your notes. I met Charlie in the first part of 1987, and we were married by the end of that year. I truly loved him, and I felt that he was my soulmate in life. After being married for 2 years, Charlie had a second bypass surgery, and the doctor said that he could eat lettuce and water for the rest of his life, and he would still have major heart problems. They said that we just had to hope that new advances in cardiac medicine would allow him to extend his life, and they did. But we determined to make the best of whatever time we had together. I never imagined then that we would have over 30 more years. I'm so grateful for that time. As many of you know, Charlie had a number of interests that he enjoyed. He loved music of almost any kind and was constantly finding more artists to add to the list. He loved his food and could tell you where he got the best fish sandwich or whatever food you might be interested in. He used to like football and loved to watch his favorite team, the one formerly known as the Redskins. He was very creative and could have been a professional photographer in another life. He loved The Walking Dead, which I hated, but he was able to talk to his friend Ann, who shared his passion for the show and would discuss the latest episode while they exercised. Finally, he loved his home and missed it while we traveled, even while on a trip to Maui. Oh yes, he loved his cats, and they had him well trained. The qualities that most drew me to Charlie were his humility, his sincerity, his love for his girls, and his even temperament, except when driving. He was pretty much an open book, in that what you saw is what you got. He was not into pretense or into trying to fool anyone. He was trusting to a fault. He was that Eskimo that would buy ice from the right salesman. But that childlike quality about him was so endearing and special that he was a joy to be around. Charlie and I had the same dry sense of humor and spent a lot of our married life laughing. We were best friends and worked as a team to deal with the non-funny aspects of life. I miss him every day, and I thank you for helping me to celebrate his blessed life in the service today. That's all I have. Thank you all, too, for participating in the service.
And say thank you for sharing all of that with us. Thank you. You did a beautiful job. Our hearts are with you. In addition to the many stories about Charlie's life that Nancy has highlighted in her beautiful eulogy, I want to share one that Dr. Henry Orsler, Charlie's pastor for many years, shared about his friend. He says, one Sunday morning, Charlie and Nancy walked into our young church as visitors. In talking with them, I found out they were neighbors of Tom and Joanne. And the reason they showed up was that during a recent snowstorm, Tom had shoveled and cleared their driveway. This act of kindness piqued Charlie's interest and eventually resulted in an invitation to our church. And it started him on a spiritual journey. Through several conversations, Charlie came to understand that being assured of heaven wasn't a matter of having your good works outweigh your bad works. Rather, it was a matter of trusting in Jesus' death on the cross as payment for our sins. I remember the day that happened for Charlie. He understood that Jesus had died in his place and for his sins. He received Jesus as his Savior and Lord and was baptized shortly afterwards. As Charlie began to grow in his Christian life, he always had a hunger to know more about faith. His participation in Bible studies and small groups was encouraging, and he always asked good and thoughtful questions. What I remember most about Charlie was his servant's heart. If something needed to be done, he did it. If someone needed to have a friend listen to them, Charlie was there. He served, often without notice. He served, always without complaining. And he served, loving people unconditionally. Jesus once said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are the love to one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." That's from John 13:34 through 35. Charlie's life truly was marked by the grace and love of Jesus, and it was my privilege to call him friend. Thank you for those words, Henry. When we think of the legacy that Charlie leaves, it seems to be a legacy of genuine love and generosity of spirit. Charlie was a husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, friend, and colleague. And in any of those roles, he wasn't perfect. But he didn't see that as a prerequisite for knowing that he was loved. And when it came to showing love, he offered it the best he knew how and sought to improve from there. He studied, practiced, and offered what he had to others. He knew that love is an action verb. It also might take practice sometimes. I think that what Charlie left us with is some welcome wisdom. The willingness to accept love does not require perfection. In offering it freely, we don't give it away, but it grows in us too. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. These are verses that Charlie found while he was in the hospital towards the end of his life. He wanted a Bible and asked Nancy to bring him one. Nancy brought him one that he kept in the car. It was nearby, and it was about this big. I actually have it down here. At first, he couldn't believe that of all the Bibles, this was the one that she brought and the one with the tiny print. But it turned out that the words he needed still found him, tiny print and all. So I wanted to share with you one of these verses as we begin to close our service. It reads, "So we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure, because we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal." Let us now honor the release of what is seen of Charles Atwell. and the power of our own inner nature being renewed by love. Please join me as we take a few moments in silence to hold Charlie in our hearts, to reflect on who he was to us personally, as well as whatever else may be present with you today. This is also a time to pray if that's how you would like to honor him. With peace in our hearts, we honor that Charles Atwell's days are complete upon this earth. His purpose fulfilled, we welcome his presence to live fully in our memories and in our hearts. In the days, weeks, and months ahead, I hope you will continue to share stories of Charlie with each other. Send Nancy a note, or maybe make a phone call. Call a mutual friend, or whatever you can, because whomever Charlie was to you, he still is. What is seen has passed, but what is unseen, those bonds of love endure in each of us. We have an incredible opportunity going forward to welcome Charlie's legacy of love in our own lives. We can do so not by leaning on our own perfection, tempting as it may be, or moving mountains, or even in our angelic words, but by leaning on the strength of that which whispers, you, just as you are. This love is for you. In doing so, we don't just accept the love that was offered by Charlie and his outer nature, but also the love that, as 1 Corinthians assures us, never ends. So for all you've shared with us, for your love and your service, thank you, Charlie. Let your love be eternal. At this time, we will conclude our celebration with military honors for Charles Atwell's service in the Air Force. You are welcome to stay with us for the presentation. The military honors will conclude our service. Go in peace. Thank you again for celebrating with us.
Please rise for the rendering of military honors.